Så, hej och hjärtligt välkomna till Rollspelsfika. Det här är lite av ett specialavsnitt på många sätt. För det första, Daniel är inte här. För det andra...
The amputation session.
Yes.
I only get to talk to half of you.
Yeah, that is another thing. We're talking in English, which we don't normally do.
Milan, lagom.
Lagom, ja okej. Och vi är på Gothcon. Så ett speciellt avsnitt med en gäst, nämligen Ron Edwards. Hej och välkommen till podden.
Tack så mycket. Tack så mycket. Jag är mycket glad för att sitta här med dig.
Jag också. Jag tycker det är jätteroligt att jag får lov att prata med dig i vår podd.
So this is my first Gothcon, and it is 1 year into the existence of my company Adept Play here in Sweden. And so after 1 year of making the company work, now I am bringing it to Gothcon to see if anybody is interested.
Great. So are people interested?
I have been surprised. There have been some really great responses. People have been very interested in what I'm doing here. I'm going to be running some old RuneQuest. I'm going to be talking about fantasy in some panels, and I have received, I think I expected to see what I saw, which is a really excited, creative scene for play and for publishing. So there's people really mean it when they bring their role-playing game to publish.
Yeah.
It's really clear. And so it's everything I expected to see, and so far people have been interested in coordinating and learning what I might have to offer, or as I see it, helping me to enrich my experience of role-playing as well. So.
But as many of our viewers or listeners know, that we've talked about you and your theories quite a bit. And
it makes it sound as though I am this mad old man with post-it notes on my cellar wall.
Yeah, but
I was only trying to say something obvious so I could talk about something interesting later, and everybody has been arguing about the obvious ever since.
Yeah, so perhaps it's not that obvious then. And I think that in our first episodes we got some of the theories, or like we misinterpreted many of the things, and like what I'm thinking is that many people think about role-playing games, and me and my partner Daniel, we're talking about role-playing games a lot on our podcast, and that is my outlet for talking theories about role-playing games. And I know, for example, I listen a lot to Adam Coble, who are also like spreading ideas, and many of the ideas are things that you've also talked about. Like I know for the whole stance theory part, which I think is like the things that you've said have become very influential, I would say.
Well, one thing I've tried to do throughout is to give credit for what I have drawn from earlier work. Some of it was very casual, like the line in an early version of RuneQuest, where it said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world, that role-playing has a lot in common with free-form jazz, and then goes on to talk about what to do. And I remember looking at that line and saying, that's a pretty powerful statement to just throw out there. And so there have always been some interesting little commentaries or statements thrown into the texts. But for stance, for example, that was not my idea. That came from what was called the RFGA discussions on a Usenet group that I was not part of. And I read it and said, oh, that is a very useful thing, and we should start talking about this. And I had to go and change up the arrangement of stances that they had proposed, because I thought I had more work in a broader arrangement of stances than they did. But the concept that these are ways to approach how you relate to a character and to the game world creatively that you shift, right, during play, sometimes not even realizing it. That was their idea. So I've tried to give credit where it came from. There was that group which first proposed terms like gamism and things like that. And then there was the texts by Jonathan Tweet in his games from the early 90s, which brought in some systematized language for different kinds of resolution. And
what games were those?
Everway, and in particular, introduced the idea of drama, karma, and fortune in terms of how to resolve something. And then you had a brief interactive fiction, it was called, interactive fiction magazine or journal, was founded by, I'll have to look at the precise names, but it's the same community that produced companies like Hogshead, Robin Laws, and John Tynes, and people like that were involved. And they tried to get kind of a more published article, scholarly approach going. That sort of thing is a lot more common now that role-playing is beginning to come into academia. But so there's always been a history of people talking about these things. If you look at the old zines, the Amateur Press Alliance zines, which I'm not even going to describe to you what that was. It's the most low-tech imaginable form of the internet that involved stamps and photocopies. And there's ones that go all the way back to the beginning of the hobby. A very famous one called Alarms and Excursions that's full of people talking about what on earth do we think we are doing? What is this activity?
Yeah. And
I think I'm going to jump to an obvious question, or maybe it's obvious because we chatted about it already, to just jump to the most challenging version of this question, which is, why bother? Who cares? If everybody is out there just enjoying role-playing, why do you want to cause trouble? And talk about it? Isn't that, first of all, there's the romantic view, that isn't that just going to ruin it, right? Aren't you just going to ruin it if we overanalyze it? Let's not touch the magic. You'll make the magic. If you touch the magic, it goes away, right? That's one attitude. Another attitude is along the lines of relevance, which is even if there's this amazing discourse or whatever, how on earth is that going to touch the experience of people? Well, here then comes a claim, which is that we are not talking about a bunch of paid experts sitting in a university talking about these things. We are just role players. And I find it actually pretty clear that when I sit down with a group of people and we are playing and we have no claim to being important or no claim to being intellectually placed in a special way toward the activity, we're just playing. You're going to hear a lot of statements about what role-playing is or is not. You're going to hear a lot of statements about what works and what does not. You're going to hear a lot of claims. Some of these are very emotional and others are not. They have a great deal to do with the history of that person, and they have a great deal to do with the systems. For a culture which often claims system doesn't matter, they sure seems to argue and fuss about it a lot. And so I think that when you bring up questions in that environment, now there is no average gamer. I love it when people say the average gamer, because I say, oh really? You know, if he's so average, how come he's not sitting here? And so without using that term, but to say in an environment of conversation where we are not supposed to be solving problems, we are not supposed to be, nobody said, okay, this is going to be our big analytical session, we are going to have the role-playing symposium now. No, we are just talking about role-playing together. And you will find some very powerful thinking, you will find some very lazy thinking, and you will find more than anything that the people talking really care. And so the idea that many role players, or one might even say the majority of players, the most players, the hobby, the average gamer, whatever they mean by that. When people say the average gamer, what they mean is most people, which is a different concept, but that's what they mean. And so if the claim is, well, most of them just don't care, I beg to differ. I think they care a lot. And that if you make it okay to talk about it, socially and personally, okay to talk about it, you're not going to scold them or tell them they're wrong or ruin their participation, that you will learn a great deal. So I think there is a lot of genuine interest and possible insight from not the fact that certain people have said, well, we are going to be the intellectuals of the hobby. No, the fact that we are not is very important.
Yeah.
That we are players who happen to make it okay to talk about it.
Because I use that word, the average gamer, and what I meant, what I realized that I meant is that, like, I have this vision that we talked about just before, that it is mostly GMs who go out on forums and search for like ideas and just, like, talk about role-playing games. Well, many players, I would presume, also talk in their groups, but I think that in many role-playing groups, they don't talk about what they're doing at that table, or perhaps ever.
I think that this is an artifact of a hobby tradition or practice that puts too much on one person. We can divide two very broad categories. One of them has to do with the procedures of play itself. The other has to do with purely social phenomena. Where do we play? When do we play? Who gets to play? How is it situated with other social activities like eating? All those things. Who is the emotional anchor for the activity, if anybody? All of those things, which apply to any social leisure activity. Typically, you have people who either take on or trade off leadership roles in those things. And that's perfectly normal, that somebody or somebodies are doing that. I get that. How come in role-playing that is also often confounded with being somebody who has a special procedural role for the activities? Say we are playing sports together and one person is particularly good at understanding the rules of this game, and should we ever kind of get a little confused about volleyball or whatever it is we do, we can always ask Hans, because Hans knows.
Yeah.
But Hans is not the person who is organizing us all to get together to play. That is Sarah. Sarah is doing that. Yeah. Sarah's great at that. If it weren't for Sarah, we would never get together. It would never work. So why do we make Hans and Sarah be the same person in role playing? That doesn't seem fair at all.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And then we look inside the procedures of play. And there are plenty of places to slice that up as well. And one of my favorites also pertains to kind of the Hans thing, which is, I'll give an example. In many of my games now, even ones I have written, I designate someone else at the table, or it's not me designating, but I prefer that someone else in the table does this if they can and want to. They look up the rules. They have it. All those things where the GM says, "Let me check the rule." I'm GMing the game. I have other things to do.
Yeah.
I'm interested in the rule too. Peter, what does it say? And Peter looks it up. Peter's got it, and what Peter says goes. And the fact that I am playing the game master, which means that I am playing the NPCs, that doesn't mean I'm the one who gets to go and judge how that rule applies. Those are two completely different tasks.
Yeah.
Do you see how even inside the procedures we are squishing so many different things onto that poor one person?
Yeah.
If we do both of those, all the procedural, authority, and then also this social role, of course that's going to be the person who runs off to go and find something out.
Yeah.
Who else would do it? Everyone else is like, well, he does it, she does it. And I think that you're probably right that in many such cases, unfortunately, the other people playing have been forced into socially and creatively subordinate positions that are actually not particularly necessary. And not you, but you out there, don't try to say, oh, but that's traditional. No, don't talk to me about that. We can be talking about the game where we have a game master and we have players, and the agency is mostly concentrated on the characters for each player and mostly concentrated on everything else for the GM. And we can talk about a game like that where the GM does hard preparation and nobody is going to be improvising who the killer clown is in the middle of play, right? None of that groovy stuff. Mm-hmm. We are playing rock solid preparation. We are moving forward with the system, all those things. You can call it as traditional as you want, and everything I said still applies.